They didn't whisper it. "You're nobody to us," my aunt said, laughing as she zipped her suitcase. "This trip is for real family," my mother added, sliding on her sunglasses. My brother smirked. "Try not to fall apart while we're gone." The door shut behind them, soft, final, cruelly calm. "Hi, everyone. My name is Aloan Price. I'm 31, and I've spent my entire life being the silent support beam in a family that only notices structure when it collapses." I stood there in the hallway, listening to their car pull away, staring at the empty space where my shoes still sat neatly by the door, like I might follow, like I belonged. They were headed to a 3-week luxury vacation. Ocean view resort. Private tours. Expensive dinners. The kind of trip you brag about online and pretend you earned. What they didn't remember, what they never noticed, was that I'd booked everything. Flights, hotel, transfers. All through accounts they never bothered to learn how to access themselves. I told myself not to cry. I'd been left out before. Birthdays. Holidays. Decisions. I was the one who paid late bills quietly, negotiated debts silently, fixed mistakes without applause. Being excluded wasn't new. Then my phone buzzed. A group photo popped up in the family chat, bare feet in white sand, champagne glasses clinking. Caption: "Finally relaxing, smiling face with hard eyes, #blessed." My chest tightened. I walked into my home office, the room where I'd kept their lives afloat without thanks, and opened my laptop, planning to drown the feeling in work. Instead, I saw it. Notifications. Warnings. Numbers shifting. Something important had just changed. They were laughing on a beach, completely unaware that the person they called nobody was the only thing standing between them and financial freefall. And for the first time, I didn't rush to fix it. I didn't become useful overnight. I was trained into it. After my father died, the debts surfaced like mold after rain. Credit cards in my mother's name. A failing family business my brother insisted was temporary. Missed payments. Penalties. Panic. I was fresh out of college, good with numbers, quiet enough not to argue, so everything slid onto my shoulders without discussion. "Just help us this once," they said. Then again. Then always. I refinanced loans. Consolidated debt. Negotiated with banks that knew my voice better than my own family did. I set up automatic payments, built buffers, created a safety net so thick they forgot the ground beneath them was unstable. They never asked how I managed it. They just assumed things worked. And because things kept working, they decided I was replaceable. That's what stung the most. Not the vacation, not the words, but the certainty with which they erased me. I stared at the alerts on my screen. A payment request stalled. An approval waiting, mine to give. I closed my laptop slowly. For the first time, I wondered what would happen if I simply stepped back. The calls started 2 days later. At first, they sounded casual. "Hey, did the payment go through?" my mother asked, voice light, rehearsed. Then sharper. "The card isn't working. Did you change something?" I hadn't changed anything. I just hadn't intervened. Their business account dipped below the threshold I used to quietly top up. A supplier flagged an invoice. A bank placed a temporary hold. Nothing dramatic, just enough to cause friction. Enough to expose how fragile everything really was. My brother left a voicemail, irritation dripping through every word. "This is bad timing, Aloan. Fix it. We're busy." Busy. On a beach. While the structure I'd built alone started groaning under their weight. I opened my spreadsheet, the one I updated weekly, religiously. Every debt. Every payment. Every risk I'd absorbed so they could live comfortably and forget responsibility existed. Seeing it laid out like that did something to me. This wasn't oversight. This was entitlement. And standing there, phone vibrating again on my desk, I finally understood something I'd been avoiding for years. They didn't respect me because I never made them feel the cost of losing me. That thought stayed with me long after I let the call ring out. The humiliation hit them in public. I knew because my phone exploded all at once. Missed calls, frantic texts, voice notes stacked like dominoes. I opened one, not rushing, not panicking. My mother's voice was shaking. Eloan, the hotel says our card was declined. In front of everyone. Another message followed, this time from my brother, all anger and panic. They escorted us to the desk like criminals. Do you know how that looked? I pictured it perfectly. The polished marble lobby. Other guests pretending not to stare. Staff smiling politely while saying policy. No shouting. No drama. Just quiet exposure. They scrambled, tried other cards, called banks, blamed the system. But the system had always been me. I finally opened my laptop. Not to fix it. Just to watch. A payment deadline passed. Then another. Small things. Visible things. They weren't drowning yet. But they were treading water in front of an audience. And for the first time in my life, the embarrassment wasn't mine to carry. I leaned back in my chair, heart steady, knowing this was only the beginning, and that once the illusion cracked, there was no way to hide what came next. That night, I didn't sleep, but I didn't cry either. I made tea. I sat at my desk. I opened every folder I'd ever kept hidden out of habit and loyalty. Loan agreements. Guarantees. Side letters. The invisible scaffolding holding their lives upright. The hurt was there, yes, but it had cooled into something sharper. I realized I'd never been powerless. I'd just been considerate. Every account I managed had limits I'd set. Grace periods I'd negotiated. Favors I'd called in under my own reputation. All legal. All reversible. All tied to my continued involvement. So I planned, not out of rage, but clarity. I wouldn't destroy anything. I'd simply step out of the way. Let timelines run as written. Let penalties apply as designed. Let lenders speak in the firm, in personal language my family had never taken seriously. No shouting. No revenge speeches. Just silence and math. By morning, I drafted a single email. Polite. Professional. Detached. It stated only one fact. I was no longer authorizing interventions on their behalf. I hovered over send, breathing slowly. This wasn't punishment. It was reality, finally unfiltered. And once I pressed that button, there would be no rushing back to save them. The fallout didn't explode. It unfolded. Banks followed policy. Suppliers followed contracts. Automatic protections I'd once smoothed over simply expired. Each missed buffer triggered another consequence, neat and inevitable. My phone rang constantly. I didn't answer. Then the messages changed. Eloan, please. Just tell us what to do. We didn't mean it like that. I watched from a distance as overdue notices stacked up. Interest recalculated. Payment plans dissolved. The business account froze, not permanently, just long enough to stall operations and invite scrutiny. They flew home early. I knew because my brother finally showed up at my door, sunburned, eyes wild, voice cracking as soon as he saw me. You did this on purpose, he said. I met his gaze calmly. No. I stopped preventing it. That landed harder than any accusation. For the first time, they were facing systems that didn't care about family titles or guilt. Systems I'd been absorbing for years, so they wouldn't have to. And now, without theatrics, without confrontation, the balance of power had shifted. They weren't angry anymore. They were afraid. They sat across from me at the dining table like strangers. No jokes. No dismissive smiles. Just paperwork spread between us, real numbers, real consequences. My mother's voice was small. We didn't know it was this bad. That's because you never asked, I said, not unkindly. My brother rubbed his face, exhausted. Just fix it. Like before. There it was. The assumption. The old script. I slid a single document across the table, my resignation from every informal role I'd filled for years. Financial manager. Emergency contact. Quiet fixer. I'm not doing this anymore, I said. They stared at me as if I'd spoken another language. The silence stretched. Heavy. Honest. For the first time, they weren't talking over me or past me. They were listening because they had no choice. Outside, the house was still. Inside, something finally broke, not me, but the version of me they'd taken for granted. And as I stood to leave the table, I knew there was only one part of this story left to tell. They're still paying it off. Not just the debt, though that's real enough, but the cost of losing the one person who made their lives feel effortless. The business survived, barely.
Smaller.
Humbled. No safety nets left to forget about. They invite me to things now. Dinners. Holidays.
Trips they pay for themselves.
The tone is different. Careful. Respectful. Afraid to misstep. I go sometimes. On my terms. Because the final twist wasn't their collapse. It was my release. I didn't need to ruin them to win. I just needed to step back and let the truth stand uncovered. That I was never nobody. I was the foundation. And once removed, everything else had to learn how to stand on its own. They learned. Slowly.
Painfully.
I moved on faster. New city. New boundaries. A life where help is given, not assumed, where love doesn't require erasure. Sometimes my mother still says, "We didn't know how much you did." I just smile. They know now. And that knowledge costs them every single day, while I finally get to live a life that's fully, unmistakably mine.